And it's Kim Kreitzer for Cam Vets Media, another edition of the Army Football Huddle. And tonight we'll break down a disappointing Army Navy game for West Point fans, a 31 to 13 win by the midshipmen. Uh, Game that Navy just got off to a fast 14 to nothing start. Army scored on a nice pass play from Bryson Daly to Hayden Reed in the second quarter and make it 14-7 at the half. But second half got two field goals from Trey Granati, but that was all the offense the cadets could complete, and Navy really made a key move with a 52-yard pass play from Brett Horvath to Eli Heinrich in the third quarter, and from there on it was tough going. So let's introduce our huddle for tonight. We've got calling in from Long Island, Chuck Donegan. Chuck, how are you?
I'm good, Ken. How about you?
Okay. And from Pelham, New York, we've got Jack McGurk.
How you doing, Ken? Great to be here.
Happy belated birthday. How was your birthday?
Thank you. It was really nice. Went out to dinner with my parents on my actual birthday, and then on Sunday, had brunch with my siblings and in-laws.
Very
Happy
good.
belated,
Very
Jack.
good. Couple of
Thank you.
celebrations there. And in West Palm, Florida, we have Richard Miller, our producer director. How are you, Richard?
Very well, Ken. A difficult game for me against Navy. It was just a game where Navy just took control in the second half and would not let up.
That's true. And from the Beat Navy studio in Huntsville, Alabama, we've got Colonel Sam Houston, who was at the game. Colonel, how are you?
Well, I'm good. And Bucky says Merry Christmas.
And who is that?
Bucky,
Who is Bucky?
Ken, you've never lived until you experience Bucky's.
Oh, okay. That's the character on your T-shirt there?
See, half the viewing audience is going to know exactly what I mean when I say Bucky's.
Yeah.
And then it's the half that doesn't know who Bucky is the half that's the withouts. So
I guess I'm in the withouts category.
you're going to have to come south and find out about Bucky.
Okay, well, we'll figure that out down the road. I just had Army football practice tonight. There, Coach Monken was talking a little bit about resiliency for the team. That even as soldiers in the Army, one day they may have a bad day, but they got to go back out on their drills the next day. Sam, you were right there. Well, I know you and I talked about it afterwards and on Sunday. What was your insight on why Navy prevailed in this Army Navy game?
First, let's just make it clear. Salute to Navy. They won. And there are no underlying excuses as to why Army lost. Navy won the game. Navy out-hit. They out-hustled. They outplayed. They were way more aggressive from start to finish. And in the ultimate coaching sideline and in coaching booth, they outcoached Army. And it was very clear from the outset that they were fresher and hungrier, and they took it to Army. You might want to do, a pseudo root cause analysis on why Army played the worst game they played all season. And I just want to remind everyone up front that this was Army's worst game of the season. Their offensive output was less than 200 yards. They had more yards against Notre Dame than they did against Navy, and that's pretty bad. And there are some, people have been wanting to point fingers at various reasons that were factors in this, and many of them are very true. There's a lot of distractions to the Army team right now, but it starts off with the fact that for 3 straight weeks leading up to the Army-Navy game, Army played 3 very, very tough opponents. And it started with Notre Dame, and there were a number of injuries, primarily on defense. And then they played UTSA. UTSA was a difficult game. Army prevailed, but again, there were a number of injuries, and they were primarily on defense. Once again, this is taking a physical toll on the Army team. Not only that, it's an emotional toll, given the importance of the games that were in this 3-game stretch. And then, of course, there was the American Athletic Conference Championship, which may have been from start to finish Army's most perfect game that they played all season. And against a very, very tough and fast and physical Tulane opponent. Unfortunately, Army did not seem to experience any additional injuries during the Tulane game, but it was very clear after this 3-game stretch that Army was emotionally exhausted, physically beat up, their defense like a triage, and then they've got a week to prepare for the Army-Navy game. So what happened in this past week? Well, distractions, lots of distractions. Primarily coaching. Matt Drinkall signs to be the Central Michigan coach. He's a very popular coach. He's been very instrumental in the offense with Army. And I believe he was the offensive line coach as well this past season. And we know how well the offensive line has done. Yes, he did stay to coach for the Navy game, but it was, impossible to keep this news away from the players. They know that this has happened, and they have to deal with this emotionally. Then there is the coaching carousel rumors that were going nonstop for a while now about the head coach, Coach Monken. Was it Purdue? Fortunately, Purdue signed somebody, and then it was, oh boy, it's going to be North Carolina. And there was a waiting game to find out that Bill Belichick amazingly ended up taking that position. And then there was the West Virginia position. And what even became had to have been even more of a distraction was the fact that it was well known that Monken had either been contacted or interviewed for both the North Carolina and the West Virginia positions. So this weighs heavily on the players. It also weighs heavily on the other coaching staff because it creates a little bit of uncertainty about the future of the program. And then probably the icing on the cake was the day of the Army-Navy game, maybe 2 hours before kickoff. Word comes across the wire via social media and a tweet that Marshall has pulled out of the Independence Bowl. So the very same morning that Army team is trying to get up for the biggest game of the year, they're finding out that their opponent for the Independence Bowl has dropped out. They don't even know if they're going to get to play in a bowl game after the season that they have had so far. So all of these things weigh heavily on the players, and of course it weighs on the coaches, and it becomes very much of a distraction. And when you combine all of these factors, it creates a very flat and very lethargic team that performs way under their expectations and their capabilities that we've seen all season. Navy took advantage of it, and hats off to Navy. They came in with a game plan that was extremely aggressive, and as soon as they had Army down, they went for the jugular, and that's that's pretty much the summation of the day. Navy won. There were no excuses from Army, only distractions. And these were certainly factors in Army playing a very bad game on the very most important game of the season. And Navy walks away with the Commander-in-Chief trophy.
Well, Sam, thing I agree with you on that is just I want to get everybody's view on this on the game, but I think they were just worn out from the 3 games, as you mentioned. Football is a very physical game, and it takes a toll on players, especially linemen. and quarter position players.
Mhm.
And I think that was a big factor. And then, as you said, Navy got off to a fast start, scored on their first possession. Um, I think Army's second possession, they throw an interception, which leads to a quick touchdown pass by Horvath to Chapman. And then got going. But 14-7 at half is really anybody's game.
Yeah.
But then Army, got a field goal on the first drive, and it still looked like it was going to get close. It got to 21-13. But then the play of the game really was Army's defense stopped Navy and forced them to punt, and they do. It was from around midfield, and Navy fakes the punt and runs the ball with a nose tackle, running the ball, and gets the first down. And yeah, that seemed to really be the difference in the game at that point. If Army had gotten the ball, they had a chance to tie the score in the third quarter, and but then Navy kept on and scored, which really decided the game. Let's just get everybody's view. Jack, you've been following Navy all year. What do you think? Why did they play? How'd they pull such a good game off?
It was a big surprise. First of all, seeing Blake Horvath back on the field, heck of a game for him. There was before the game a little bit of positive news for Army. They were surprised with the Joe Moore Award for most outstanding offensive line in college football. First time Army's ever received that. I'm sure our friend and colleague Steve Shalou was happy about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was surprising how well Navy was playing. In fact, one of the stats jumps out at me. Total offensive yards for Army 178. So the Navy defense really stepped up in this game. There was kind of a scary moment early in the game where someone, I guess, accidentally stepped on Bryson Daly's fingers, and then he was taking a couple of snaps with blood pouring out of his fingers. I don't know if you guys saw that. Eventually, he went over the sideline and got
When
taped
did
up.
that happen, Jack?
That was, I think it was in the first quarter, Sam.
It was early in the game.
Yeah.
It wasn't readily apparent for people who were actually at the stadium watching the game.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. And Chuck, what do you think of the game?
Yeah, it was a definite shocker, Ken. Was not expecting Army to lose as they did. Fortunately, how it goes sometimes was definitely shocked in that fourth quarter by the fake punt that we all saw. That was definitely something out of left field, but you know, all told, hopefully, they'll get things back on track going forward. That's my hope.
Yeah. Well, it was a game that Army struggled throughout, but had a chance going into the third quarter, going into the fourth. But then Navy poured it on. Richard, what was your view on the game?
My view on the game is I really think once I saw that fake punt in the game, I just could tell this was not going to be Army's day. They would just I think they just couldn't handle the attack brought on by I think the Navy's defense. They really kept Army at bay throughout. I think again the second half and a couple of those plays in particular. I just think the game was really I think more likely again all Navy from that point on into the game, getting running the ball and the time of possession really tipped the scale in Navy's favor, and that's something that Army just couldn't really catch up to.
Okay. Okay. I was looking at the Army defense forced three punts, but the challenge were a couple of interceptions by Bryson Daly. Um, one in the first quarter that led to Navy's second score, and then one in the fourth quarter that led to Navy's last score of the game. Um, that by Kenneth McShane. So, Sam, number, I think Jack pointed out that Army was held to 178 yards of offense and 113 yards rushing when they were leading the country in rushing, getting well over 300 yards a game. Was that just effective defense by the Naval Academy?
Well, I mean, that's part of it. They had a defensive game plan coming in, but the rest of it, it comes down to what was the play calling by Army and what were adjustments that were made during the game to counter what Navy was doing on the line of scrimmage. And it didn't seem like there was anything. Last week during the huddle, I made mention of the fact that Army needed to open up their playbook. They didn't need to go conservative. They needed to open up their playbook. And I said that if this turns into a Bryson Daly left, Bryson Daly right, Bryson Daly up the middle game, it's going to be a long day for Army. And lo and behold, Army rolled out from the very beginning, and it looked like they had reconstituted their offense from last season. And they played almost, I don't know what the exact number, but well over 90% of the snaps came from the shotgun. And these plays, they're a little slower to develop than quick hitters at the line of scrimmage. There was very little actual triple option reads that were being made. There were very little counter to the practically. I didn't see Army run any counter. I didn't see any trap type plays or anything like that. They were running strictly between the tackles, and very rarely were they even attempting to take the ball outside. But along the line of scrimmage, Navy, ever since Brian Newberry came to Navy, when he was the defensive coordinator and continued since he's been the head coach, he's had a very aggressive style, especially at the line of scrimmage, where he shifts his defensive line before the snap. This is for several reasons. One is to show the offense a defense, and then change the look right before the play, so it doesn't give the offense time to make any change or audible or anything like that. The shift in the defensive line shifts the defensive line, which Navy's defensive line is not that big. And this year, you would have expected Army's offensive line, which is the biggest offensive line of the Monken era and probably in the history of Army, with all the accolades they had and all of the excellent play that they've had this entire season, you would have expected Army's offensive line to manhandle Navy's defensive line. Navy countered this by their shift before the snap. And what it did was it gave the lineman a read, then the defensive lineman shifted to where they could then attack the gap and not have a direct block from any of the offensive linemen. The defensive lineman would be attacking the gaps from an angle, and they could shake the blocks easier. And this gap attack defense that they were running was disrupting the Army offensive line blocking process, and as a result, that dominance at the line of scrimmage, we just weren't seeing it. And they never really seemed to make any adjustment to change that. And adjustments can either be made along the line of scrimmage or they can be made in the play calling itself. And honestly, I didn't see that happening. But I want to point out something about the Army-Navy game, and that is this. There is the constant argument that the Army-Navy game is always close. It's not. The Army-Navy game is a slugfest, yes, but the Army-Navy game does not always come down to heart-stopping moments at the goal line in the last minute of the game. But when a blowout happens, 9 times out of 10, Navy's the team that's putting the blowout on Army. In the 11 seasons that Monken has been coach, there have been 2 blowouts in the Army-Navy game, 31-7 and 31-13. Both of those owned by Navy, and that was 2 out of their last 3 wins. And Navy does this by playing aggressive, by having a creative offensive game plan where they are not afraid to take some risk. They're not afraid to put the ball in space and in the perimeter. They're not afraid to show different looks than what they've shown all season. And when they have Army down, they go for the jugular and they pour it on. They don't get the lead and then start playing conservative to save the lead in the game. Army came out playing conservative from the start. And part of it is, some of the factors that we talked about. But part of it is just from what I saw, it did not seem that Army had a game plan on offense, nor a effective way of scouting out what they expected Navy to do so they could make adjustments when they saw it. And as the game went on and Navy scored more points, Army got desperate. And when desperation happens, and this is what I talked about last week, we wanted to put Navy in a position where they were desperate in the 3rd and 4th quarter and they were making mistakes. Nope, the tables were flipped. Navy made Army desperate because Navy had gone up so much and Army was making mistakes. And, it resulted in 2 turnovers. But it was pretty obvious when Army got within the red zone on a couple of second half drives and were unable to convert in the red zone and had to kick field goals. And then Navy was swapping field goals for touchdowns. That Navy definitely had this game in wraps. And in the 4th quarter, there was no doubt who was winning. And unfortunately, it wasn't Army. It was Navy. As for that fake punt, we talked a little bit about this. There's historical perspective on Navy running fake punts in the Army-Navy game as recently as 2021. Army had Navy on a 4th and I think 3-yard situation. Yeah. And Navy ran a very similar play. It was Diego Fago took the ball and ran left and got the first down. Why in the world Army was not suspecting Navy to run another fake punt when Navy had enough of a lead to where they could take that kind of risk? I don't know. But that overload punt fake to the left caught Army very flat-footed, which was very obvious. But the exclamation point to that play was that the Navy ball carrier fumbled. And you knew it was not Army's day when another Navy player immediately recovered that fumble when there were several Army players in the vicinity when it happened. And that's how you knew. Everything is bouncing Navy's way today. Everything's going Navy's way today. And this was just an exclamation point to a bad day out on the field of friendly strife.
Well, yeah. Coach Monken, when I talked to him about it today after practice, said that it was his mistake to have kept the punt block on and to not have played for a return and let the offense try to score at that point, which would have had the potential of a 2-point conversion of tying the game. And but he's made a lot of the right calls this year. I think that's one he'd like to have back. He said he wakes up in the middle of the night worrying, about mistakes in games that they didn't win. I think coaches feel worse about losses than they do good about wins.
Yeah.
But
if I was to just go ahead and plant the seeds for anyone in the Army camp that's listening, it's just me. I'm not a coach. I played 150s, but here we go. Learn from what Navy did. Just learn from what they did. Take a long look at what they did. and not try to duplicate the plays that they ran or anything like this. But here's my advice for next year's Army Navy game. Start now making out an aggressive game plan. Make it a point to play aggressively on offense, to run your playbook, your entire playbook, to attack Navy on the perimeters. Everywhere you run plays, attack Navy and force them to stop you from running those plays. Run those plays until they stop you. If they can't stop you, keep running those plays. And when you get the lead, don't go into conservative mode. Keep attacking for 4 straight quarters. Run the score up.
Yeah.
Because one of the best feelings in the world, and unfortunately we don't feel it much at Army because we're always sweating bullets when we have the lead, is feeling that in the fourth quarter you're celebrating because the game is already determined and it's pretty obvious who's winning. And it's been a long time since I've been in an Army-Navy game where Army had the big enough lead in the fourth quarter where we knew we could just celebrate. And so that's a psychological thing too. Army, you can do that. And we would all love to see Army come out and start punching and swinging haymakers left and right at Navy from start to finish next year and run the score up. I don't care if it's 52-10 because Navy would do it to you if they could.
Okay. I think one of the discussion points is, and even Coach Monken said that the playing the Army-Navy game the week after the conference championship may not really make sense from a competitive point of view because it may not happen that often, that your team, either Army or Navy, is in the conference championship. Last time Navy was in was 2016, and we know what happened then. So that's one of the things I think is going to get looked at. But there's so much flux in college football that it could there could be other changes that are to who's in the conference, who's not in the conference that could affect things as well. But right now, Army's got a good thing, and Navy being able to be the only football bowl subdivision team playing that day, and has a huge viewership, has a television contract with CBS, and so on, which is really a great asset to the schools. I'm just going to go over on defense. Caleb Fordner had 8 tackles. The junior linebacker Andon Thomas had 7. Max DiDomenico had 6. Casey Larkin 6 tackles. Keith Chance had 5. And Cody Harris Miller had 4. And 1 sack on the day. That was by Elo Madozi. And Navy had 4 sacks on the day, 2 of them by Kyle Jacob, and 1.5 by Justin Reed. So an advantage there. Of course, Navy had 3 interceptions on Army, which is very unusual. Bryson Daly didn't have, I don't think he had 3 interceptions the whole season coming in. But it's one of those things when you're playing from behind. So any more thoughts on the game? We're going to have Richard. Richard, you got your lineup of the 4 college football playoff games this weekend?
According to the college football schedule right now for the games, they will be currently coming up college football schedule for this weekend. Games coming up from the college football playoff. Let's see. Oh yeah, we have number 11 SMU taking on Penn State. That will be a 12 noon.
Let's take a second on each one. SMU at Penn State. Sam, do you think SMU's got much of a chance going into Happy Valley and 100,000 people waving white towels?
I mean, there's always a chance on any given Saturday. SMU, SMU played a bad first half against Clemson in the ACC championship game, but they battled back. And so they showed their mettle. They showed what they're made of. It took a long late field goal from the Clemson Tigers to win that game and keep it from going into overtime. Penn State, they got rocked pretty good by Oregon, and there's always the possibility that they might be a little punch drunk or hung over from that, or there might be some overconfidence on their part, but we'll see. On paper, I would say Penn State and Happy Valley is, definitely a favorite.
Okay, what's the next game, Richard?
The next game will also be, let's see. Oh, one of the games earlier before that will be also number 10 Indiana taking on number 7 Notre Dame on December 20th.
Okay, let's talk about that for a second. That sounds like one of those matchups in the NCAA tournament they set up for the second round to have, two geographic rivals meet, and certainly a great season for Indiana. They've used the transfer portal effectively, and so has Notre Dame. Do you think Indiana has much chance going into South Bend?
Well, let's keep in mind that Indiana was neck and neck with Army on some special stats, and that was as we went into the season, they were both Army and Indiana were undefeated, and both Army and Indiana had never trailed in a game. And it was, well past the halfway point of the season before Indiana ever even trailed in a game. And they were undefeated up until they played Ohio State. So they have demonstrated themselves to be a very prolific offense and a very lights out defense at times. And they are the kind of team that could possibly give this Notre Dame squad some fits. The advantage goes to South Bend and touchdown Jesus. So I think Notre Dame has a little bit more of a powerhouse this year. A lot of times they go into the college football playoff or when they've been in the BCS in the past, they're a little overrated. I don't think so this year. I think that they're probably the better team on paper, and they're most likely that's the team that's going to prevail.
Okay. What's next, Richard?
Next on that list is Clemson taking on number 5 Texas. Clemson is the number 12 team that will be at Texas, and number 9 Tennessee taking on number 8 Ohio State. That will be an 8 o'clock game.
Okay, so what do we think about Clemson going into Texas? That's another. These are tremendous home field advantages.
Yeah,
the schools playoff path.
Hey, look, I love Dabo Sweeney, and I think he's just an outstanding coach. He's the kind of guy that people would want to play for. And back when I was in high school playing football every summer, I used to go to Clemson football camp with Danny Ford. And I learned all kinds of stuff, improved my game, upped my game quite a bit, learning technique and skills at those football camps. And so, I naturally have an affinity to the Clemson Tigers, but I got to say, I think Texas is going to be very hungry after what happened in the SEC championship. So I'm going to see Texas prevail in that one. As far as Tennessee and Ohio State, Tennessee early on this season was just looking dominant. I mean, really dominant. They were lights out on defense. They were putting up prolific and ungodly numbers of points, and then they just suddenly became pedestrian. And I don't have much of an explanation for that. Maybe just a brutal SEC schedule. But going into the Horseshoe, playing Ohio State, I just don't see much hope for the Tennessee Volunteers in Ohio State land. It's going to be the Buckeyes prevailing in that one.
So home field advantages is really going to be a big part of the first round of the college football playoff.
True. And then we're not even analyzing, and we don't have to do that right now because of the time factor, but we're not even taking a look at what the weather is going to be. at some of these stadiums this weekend, and it's not probably not going to be much of a factor, say at Texas, but Tennessee, what happens if there's bone chilling cold and snow in Ohio State? That can be a big factor. And SMU going up to Penn State and Happy Valley, the same thing could be a big factor if they're going into
Yeah.
winter weather. So,
Richard, do you have the times on these games? Why don't you go through the start
Oh,
times on these?
the times on these games. I do have those, Ken. Let's see. We will have the times on those games according to these games. Starting off on, let's say the Saturday games. The SMU Penn State game will kick off at 12 o'clock Saturday. Clemson and number 5 Texas will be a 4 o'clock game. Number 9 Tennessee and Ohio State. That's an 8 o'clock game on
So at Ohio
ABC.
State's a night game.
Yeah, Indiana Notre Dame prime time 8 o'clock on ABC.
Okay, so Notre Dame
I
and
believe
Ohio
also, I
State
think
have
the
the
first
home
time
games
since
at night. Penn
the
State's
early '90s that Notre Dame's played a game at night at their stadium, and it is not on it's not on NBC.
okay. Yeah, yeah. But getting a home game is a big deal. But actually, with what Richard's talking about, Notre Dame never having played a home game in December, it's always a question with these older stadiums if they are really winterized and whether the plumbing's going to work if you get a few days of freezing weather. Although, of course, Notre Dame Stadium was completely modernized about 10 years ago, where they built a ring around the old stadium, and I'm sure uh, modernized a lot of the facilities there. Penn State, that was kind of an issue. Even when we were out there, Sam, what was that, 2017 maybe? And actually, it was like 2015. Army went out and played at Penn State, and they were talking then about the need to rebuild a lot of their stadium, which was built in sections for playing winter events. Um, and they all want to play the hockey game. Okay, so we covered that. Let's talk a little bit about Army's opponent, Louisiana Tech. They this year beat Nichols, lost to North Carolina State, 30-20. They lost to Tulsa, lost at FIU, Florida International. They won big over Middle Tennessee. They lost to New Mexico State. They beat UTEP. They lost to your school, Sam Houston, 9-3. And then they lost to Jacksonville State, and they beat Western Kentucky. Lost to Arkansas 35-14. And then their last game was 11:30 Thanksgiving weekend. They lost 33-0 to Kennesaw State.
Yeah.
So they've had kind of a mixed season. Looking a little bit at their some of their stats. They rush the ball 115 yards a game, give up 120 yards a game rushing. Passing, they pass a lot. 243 completions out of 386. And they're averaging 228 yards passing. They give up 181, so there's a big advantage there. 18 passing touchdowns, giving up 11. And so their average yardage per game is 343. They give up 301. And anything there, Sam, that suggests their strengths or weaknesses?
No. Let's let's just make mention of the fact that first, be thankful that the officials from the Independence Bowl managed to find somebody to play Army. But keep in mind that Louisiana Tech was not bowl eligible. They were not meant to be in the Independence Bowl. They have not had a great season. It's very unfortunate that Army is not going to play 10-3 Marshall, who won their conference, and that Marshall had backed out of the bowl game. This is all just very unfortunate, and it speaks volumes to the catastrophe that the transfer portal is becoming to college football right now. If something is not done to reel it in, this is going to be the norm this time of year every year. And we'll be shuffling to find 5 and 7 teams to come in and play bowl games. So my understanding, and Louisiana Tech, why would Louisiana Tech be a pretty decent pick for the Independence Bowl? Well, they're just right down the road in Ruston, Louisiana. And so there's a good chance that they'll bring a pretty decent following of fans to the stadium, so that it kind of reasonably looks like there's some fans in the stands that are rooting for Louisiana Tech. But I also I haven't really studied the transfer portal so much on how it's affecting Louisiana Tech, but by my understanding, they've got several players that are in the transfer portal as well. So we might not even see some of the starters that they normally have been playing this past season. But notwithstanding the fact that it is a game, that it is going to happen, this is good for the Army team. I plan to be at the Independence Bowl, and this is because I'm with Army, through thick and thin. I'm with Army all the way. And there is an opportunity at the Independence Bowl, whether it be against Louisiana Tech or against Marshall. There is an opportunity now for Army to make history again this season, and that is to have the most wins in a single season that Army has ever had in their long and illustrious history. So I want to be there for that. And no matter what the final score is, which, I fully expect and am very highly confident it'll be Army winning the game, it will be Army's 12th victory of the season, and that's going to be very special. So I do wish, though, that if we were in a perfect world, that it had been the Marshall team that had won their conference, that team would be the team that Army was going to face. It's not. It's Louisiana Tech. We'll be very thankful to the school from Ruston for being willing to fill in the gap and come play in the bowl game and come take on the Army team.
Okay. We'll have to check, see what Louisiana Tech has in the transfer portal. Of course, one Army player decided to go in the transfer portal. Kanye Udo, the fine sophomore running back, has gone into the transfer portal, so he won't play against Louisiana Tech. We'll have to see if he finds a new home or perhaps finds his way back to West Point. We'll have to see. Let's see. Why don't we get Jack? Why don't you remind us where Navy and Air Force are going to go play bowl games?
Well, Air Force, their season is over. Their season ended the weekend before the Army Navy game. They ended it with a win, though, the 31-20 win over San Diego State, and so the Falcons finished the season 5 and 7 overall. But they had in the game 404 total yards, 276 rushing, and the Dylan Carson had a 1 yard run, a touchdown run to take a 7-0 lead in the game. Cade Frew had 77 yards on 7 carries. Quentin Hayes, quarterback, had a 1 yard run for a touchdown run, 14 to give the Falcons a 14-7 lead. But anyway, Air Force, finishing the season 5 and 7. And
let's just stop on that for a second. Sam, does that mean that Air Force turned down the Independence Bowl because there were 16 teams that were asked ahead of Louisiana Tech if they were interested in Louisiana Tech was the first school to say yes.
No, Air Force wasn't invited to the Independence Bowl. So Air Force wasn't invited to any bowl game. So
They were, well, my understanding is they went down the list of 5 and 7 teams, and they asked, the invitations were offered based on the academic progress rating. And I got to think Air Force would have been closer to the top of that list than many others. Do you think they just turned it down, or?
No, they weren't offered. That they were not one of the teams that you're talking about. Air Force wasn't offered to go to the Independence Bowl. So,
Okay.
you
Because
know,
they would have been on the list of the 5 and 7 teams.
I'd imagine that if Air Force had been offered, they probably would have accepted. I'm sure Air Force would want another whack at Army after this.
You would think.
But they weren't one of the teams offered.
I'll have
So,
to check on that and see if
as a
we
matter
can
of
find
fact,
out.
as I recall, I saw an article where Air Force, when Louisiana Tech was named to go to the Independence Bowl, Air Force complained that they weren't asked. So, but you know, it is what it is. Now I haven't been paying attention to whether or not there's been any other bowl games that have had somebody back out because of transfer portal stuff, and they had to go offer another 5 and 17. Independence Bowl is the one that we're focused on. But I have heard that Oklahoma, for example, who Navy's going to play, and mind you, I'm going to say again, this is a 6-6 Oklahoma team. This is not a Lakin Riley, 11-1 Oklahoma team that you used to see in like in the BCS or something like that. This is a 6-6 run-of-the-mill Oklahoma team. My understanding is they've got a number of starters that are in the transfer portal right now, and so this is another example. Oklahoma has a big enough program to where they didn't back out of the bowl game, but even the 6-6 Oklahoma team that kind of backed into a bowl game is not going to be the same 6-6 Oklahoma team that took down Texas when they play Navy. And I fully expect Navy to roll Oklahoma in their bowl game.
Okay, well, I got to check to see why Air Force wasn't invited. I mean, obviously, for the bowl committee, they really liked the idea of having an in-state team as one of the participants to help draw a crowd. So we'll say.
And by the way, that's
Check
the Armed Forces Bowl.
On the Armed Forces Bowl?
Yeah, that's Navy and Oklahoma in the Armed Forces Bowl down in Fort Worth, Texas.
Yep. That's the day before the Independence Bowl, by the way.
Yep.
So that'll be, they always did a nice job with that game at playing it at TCU, very modern stadium. And they always did a nice job with that game. Chuck, where are some of the other teams in the American Athletic Conference playing in bowl games?
Well, again, they're scattered all around the country. In fact, right now, as we stream, the annual Frisco Bowl is underway between Memphis and West Virginia. And 5 minutes to go in the first. Memphis currently holds a 7-0 lead over rivals West Virginia.
So you got one. That's interesting that Memphis got one of the first bowl games of the season. And a pretty good draw on playing West Virginia. That sounds like I mean, Memphis finished third in the conference, Sam?
Yeah, they had 10 wins, I think.
So it's interesting that they drew West Virginia in that and got the Frisco Bowl, which is not a huge game, but certainly a good opportunity for them. Okay. What else we want to cover? We'll try. Go ahead.
Chuck was still telling us what other bowl games AAC teams were in.
Yes, I was. Yep, there's a few others. We have the Myrtle Beach Bowl will be underway 2 days before Christmas as well. explanatory. And then on Christmas Eve will be the Hawaii
Who's in
Bowl.
that one, Chuck?
Myrtle Beach.
Yep. I'll get that for you 1 second. A minor technical issue on my end.
I think Coastal Carolina is playing at home in that one.
Yeah.
Yep. UTSA.
UTSA. Okay. Great.
Yep.
So that's a good one for them. Any other team from the American Conference in a game?
We know Tulane is.
Oh, here we go.
Well, Ken?
Yeah.
There was one other game, the Salute to Veterans Bowl, South Alabama 30 to 23 win.
Over who?
That was over Western Michigan.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, and the Hawaii Bowl, just mentioned that's between South Florida and San Jose State.
South Florida.
And that's Christmas Eve.
South Florida is going to fly to Hawaii to play a game at Christmas time.
Yep.
Against Ken Niumatalolo's team.
Oh.
Yeah, that's good. Our condolences. I read on Twitter his father just passed away. He wrote a glowing note about his tribute to his father who passed away. Our condolences to Ken Niumatalolo and his family. But a couple of awards that I saw came out this week. Paolo Generali, the starting right guard, was named a third-team All-American by the Associated Press. And Lucas Scott was named an All-American by the Football Writers Association of America, an organization I'm a member of. So we talked to both of them after practice today. They're both, credited their teammates for their success. So Army got a number of awards this year. So so tell us, Sam, what was your experience like at the Army-Navy game? I know you got to the gala dinner on Friday night.
There's always so many, great things going on around the Army-Navy game. It is a true icon of college football and should be on everybody's bucket list. And if you go, you should do everything you could to try to participate in as many of the activities as you can. Some of them is harder to get into than others. But the past 2 years, we've gone to the Army-Navy Gala. For years, I've always had 2 complimentary tickets to this thing, and I never go. And then last year, I went for the first time in Boston. It was great. This year, it was at Union Station, which is a very beautiful architectural wonder building there in Washington, D.C. And the setting was just stunning. It was the decorations, the way they had projected the American flag on the ceiling of this grand structure that we were in, and the attendance. There must have been at least 1,500 or more people there for both Army and Navy, and there were also some very famous people. And I mean, I walked in, and just right behind me came Urban Meyer, former coach of Florida and Ohio State, and I talked to him for a long time during the reception beforehand. And Urban is a good friend of Coach Monken and spoke so very highly of Jeff, and he's all in for Army. So, Urban Meyer was there to root for Army, and, was very highly appreciative of wanting to hear about my service and seemed to be more interested in listening to me talk about things that I had done in the Army and places that I had seen and dusty lands that I had deployed to than actually me given the opportunity to ask him about football. But I did ask him about future coaching, and he said, something very poignant. He said, "No, I'm done with coaching, and I'll tell you why. I'm not dealing with NIL, and I am not dealing with transfer portal." And it was very, very to the point about that, very blunt.
Well, I hear a few coaches like that. Nick Saban says about the same thing.
Yep. And someone else who was in attendance, but I didn't see him. I didn't even realize he was there, but Bill Belichick was in attendance, sitting over on the Navy side. And of course, he's the new University of North Carolina coach, but of course he was a Navy assistant coach at one time. And of course, you have the superintendents from both the academies. You have many dignitaries from the city of Washington, the Washington Commanders, who were helping to host the football game because it was at their stadium and everything else. And we're all dressed to the nines, so everybody's looking good. The food was good. My only gripe about the Army Navy Gala was the acoustics were absolutely atrocious, just terrible. It was very difficult to hear anybody talk. But and then something else that Army Navy's known for, one of the beautiful things about a 3 p.m. kickoff is that it gives you lots of time to tailgate. And there is a tailgate that has quickly become probably the most sought after tailgate of the on the Army side, and that's the Johnny Mac Foundation Johnny Mac Fund tailgate. And it did not fail to deliver again this year. It was simply phenomenal. All of the vendors that were there, you make a donation to the Johnny Mac Fund, it gets you in, and once you're in the perimeter, every single thing that's in there, you have at it. Everything from free cigars to different premium liquor distilleries and beer vendors and all types of food, but that's not the only thing. What's really neat is how many classmates and other grads that that you will run into at these events. And I ran into so many people that I knew, and even had a chance to talk to a couple of Army legends of Army football team when I was at the academy. One was my classmate Rob Dickerson, who is still just a giant of a man and a larger than life character, but he was a freaking legend on the football field. And then while I was talking to him, none other than Don Smith, who was class of '86 and one of the most dominant offensive linemen in Army football history and an All-American, a Kodak All-American. He was there, and I got to talk to him at length, and he just towers over me. He's so big. Looks like he could still play. And then, after the game, the fact that it was in Washington, D.C., if you cannot find something to do in Washington when you have access to the metro, then it means that you're too lazy to even get out of your hotel room. And believe me, we took advantage of Washington, D.C. We did a lot of stuff. Of course, the game did not go our way. I was not that impressed by the FedEx Field. Last year, Gillette was fantastic. FedEx Field left a lot to be desired. It didn't hold as many fans, and it seemed very outdated in a lot of the services that it provided. And I was up in the club level. So if I was, if the powers that be were to ask me, should we do it at FedEx Field again, I would say no. And it has.
Well, there may be a new stadium in Washington by the time the rotation goes back to DC.
Yeah. No,
It
next
was
year
10 years since they'd been down there before. Actually, it's like 12 years.
I know next year it's at another stadium that I'm not a big fan of, and that next year it's in Baltimore at M&T Stadium. And even though we have a fondness in our heart for M&T Stadium because that's where Army broke the streak, and we were all there for that, but it's another stadium that doesn't hold as many fans as like Lincoln Financial or Gillette, and it seems a little
Or the
outdated.
Meadowlands. Meadowlands is now the biggest of the options.
Yeah, and that's where it's going in 2 years, and well,
It's
Newark,
probably the least amenities of any of the
yeah,
places.
Newark leaves a
It's out in
lot
the
to be
middle of nowhere.
desired, man. I'm not sure about that one. I'm surprised we're even going back to that stadium, but then it
I
gets
was
back
gonna,
to Philly, and we can all be happy with Philly. So
yeah, Philly's, it's a good stadium. It's well hosted, lots of things to see and do. I was just going to mention I went to the hockey game that was in Washington on the Thursday night. Army played Penn State at the Capital One Arena, lost 4-1. It was a neat place to be. And then on Friday morning, they had the Patriot Games, which is a set of competitions between the two academies. West Point basically entered in one of their Sandhurst teams that I think had won the Sandhurst competition last year. And they had a tug of war, which Navy won, a pull up competition, that Army won. They had a run around the reflection pool, which is about nearly a mile around, carrying loaded stretchers, and Navy won that. But my understanding is Army won the overall competition. Um,
They did.
and then I got to the debate team match, which was in the Russell Senate office building in the Kennedy caucus room, which goes back to having held the hearing after the Titanic disaster, and quite a few other notable hearings in over the 110-year history of that building.
Ken,
Yeah.
question: is there a winner for that debate, or was it just like a debate for
No,
just?
there was a winner. It was a 4-3 win by Army.
Oh,
Army
oh,
debate team.
they actually keep scoring that.
Oh,
Cool.
they keep scoring everything
Cool.
in these things,
Wow.
Richard. And the motion was if $500 million could be taken from the Air Force's budget, how would each branch of service spend it? And Army argued that they would spend the money on increased drone capability, and they did a pretty good job with that argument. Navy argued for more 3D printers to be expanded on Navy ships to make spare parts.
Okay.
Well, I thought they kind of made a couple of mistakes in justifying that. It actually is a pretty good idea if it works. And I have no idea how 3D printing works, but they kind of overstated the benefit of that.
Mm.
Although if it does work, it has some benefit.
That was a losing argument from the start right here.
Okay, well, what was interesting was the panel included Admiral Mike Mullen, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who I got a chance to say hello to. He had spoken at an event I put together in 2005 in Nettuno, Italy. And the Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, who's on the West Point Board of Visitors, and Congressman Darrell Issa, very influential congressman. And so it was quite an impressive group. And I was looking for the number one cadet on the West Point team was introduced later this week as having just been named a Marshall Scholar. And okay, yeah, it's on my scorecard. Knox Watson from class of 25 from Weston, Connecticut, got the best debater award, and then he was named a Marshall Scholar this week. So that was good, and just a lot of things before the game. We were out for the march on. We had the video on both the march on of the cadets, and then the Naval Academy. What was interesting, Sam, and was both the brigade commander of the midshipmen and the first captain from West Point were both women this year. And I don't know if that's happened before, but they were out bringing back their prisoners at the beginning of the game, the exchange students from each other's academies in a famous ritual. They also, of course, led the march-ons, and then all the pageantry before the game, the flyovers by the Army helicopters and the Navy jets. Beautiful national anthem sung by a combined choir, and we have the video of that, and the invocation by the chaplain from West Point. So all things you put together. The only thing I would say that disappointed me was the halftime show, because it was West Point's chance to do it, and they didn't go on the field. The West Point band didn't go on the field. They had the vocalist sing from a spot in the stands. And there was a year, and maybe you remember it, I think it was 2016, where I was out on the field. It was just the start of halftime. And I'm thinking, I recorded the West Point band, I think did a combined performance with the Naval Academy band. and I see a group of distinguished-looking individuals standing to my side, but I decided it's time to go get a cup of coffee. So I'm walking towards the tunnel, and then they announce to sing, I'm proud to be an American, Lee Greenwood. And I just turned around and I went back out and recorded it. And I thought that was a phenomenal moment. I believe it was 2016, but no halftime show. It was just, except for the vocalists who did a nice job. I know them. They're doing great, do great work. But were you surprised they didn't do a halftime show, Sam?
Honestly, Ken, as soon as halftime started, I was back into the club level on a quest for adult beverage, and then a failed hunt with Stephanie for something from the Army Navy gift shop.
Yep.
But the line was too long, and by the time we made it back to our stands, the second half had already started back up.
Yeah, we didn't miss anything in the merchandise stand. I bought something and it was about twice as expensive as I thought it should be.
We didn't buy anything, and I was okay with that.
Yeah, there's more on other places. But a lot of good things. Also at halftime, they did do the exchange of dignitaries. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin went from the Navy side to the Army side. And the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General C.Q. Brown, was escorted from the Army side to the Navy side to watch the second half. So that was another aspect of the traditions of the Army-Navy game, of which there are so many. Okay, well, we'll try to get together next week before Christmas and do more of a look at the Independence Bowl and maybe some of the other bowls, run down the games that are this weekend, and the first historic set of college football playoff games at campus sites, something that's been thought about for a long time, and it's finally here this weekend. And boy, this has generated a lot of attention. And I don't know, is it feel like the NFL is getting put on the sideline for a bit with the attention this college football playoff is getting?
It is if you're in New York.
Well, New York, we don't have NFL teams anymore, so.
Yeah. I think that this is, having the college football playoff at the FBS level is a good thing. It's been something that's been needed for a long time. It basically creates a field of teams that gives more teams the opportunity to prove what they're made of and have an opportunity at winning the national title. However, there is a dark lining to this, and when you turn over the coin of the CFP, you're looking straight into the barrel of the transfer portal and NIL. And transfer portal is gutting teams at the wrong time. And it is creating a situation in college football where it is too easy to jump ship from one college to another. My 10 cents worth here, I will say again, is that it's time for NCAA and college football to take a hard look at the transfer portal and how lax it is right now, and put a clamp down on standards that, and one of my first suggestions would be to bring back the rule that used to exist before the transfer portal, that if a player wants to jump from one team to another, they have to sit out a season. And that would give them rise in thought to whether or not they really wanted to jump into the portal if it meant they were going to have to sit out an entire season in order to make that transfer and jump. And then there's the subject of NIL. NIL right now has become a cash industry that is turning into haves and have-nots. And it almost seems like it's specifically designed to prop up the recruiting capabilities of the big teams in the Power Four conferences, and push out the smaller teams or the lesser teams of the G5 in FBS football, and it creates a very big disparity with the amount of cash that is being offered to be thrown around. For some schools, it's not available for the other schools, and of course, we know for a fact that the service academies, they do not benefit from NIL because they cannot participate in it, nor will they. And the transfer portal is never a benefit to the service academies because it only is an opportunity for players in the first 2 years of their cadet or midshipman experience to exit the academy and go play for someone else. It is never a two-way street. It is too hard to get into one of the service academies to start with. And any person who wants to transfer to a service academy would have to would not only have to earn an appointment to the academy, but would also have to start as a plebe. So what your academic level is at the school you're coming from doesn't mean anything. You would have to start your 4 years all over again at West Point. So no one's going to transfer to the service academies. So that makes us unique. It's a source of pride. It's a chip on the shoulder. But that little those matters aside that need to be cleaned up and need to be analyzed and discussed can still be flipped over, that the college football playoff is a good thing, even if people are still a little angry at how subjective some of the selections seem.
Jim, how long do you think it's going to be before they go out to 16 teams?
You know what? How many teams are there in FBS?
120.
Okay, so why don't we say that the college football playoff starts in week 1 of college football, and all 120 teams are participating. How about that? And then we can.
Let's propose. Some of the coaches want to do that for the NCAA basketball tournament.
Look, I know I'm being facetious here, but no matter how much they expand the college football playoff, there is always going to be a fringe team that someone's going to be angry they didn't get invited and say that it was subjective. So, that's why I say let's just start at week 1 of college football. Guess what? 120 teams, you're all in. You're all in the college football playoff. We'll see who the last one standing is at the end of the year. But, but on that same note, I will say, you mentioned the Army-Navy game, and when we were talking earlier, you mentioned that you had said that Coach Monken had said that he would be in favor of the Army-Navy game going back to the Saturday after Thanksgiving, like it used to be, and stuff like that. And I think that prior to this past Saturday, I would have disagreed with that. I know that there were a lot of hoops that were passed through the AAC to keep the Army-Navy game neutral and keep it on the special weekend that it is. And maybe AAC and Army didn't expect Army to have the season that it did in the conference and go to the championship game. So with that being said, both Navy and Army have seen what the fallout is of going to the American Athletic Conference Championship game the week before Army-Navy, and what it can do to your team and how worn out your team can be, and the injuries that you may sustain that you can't carry into the game as people who are playing on the field. So, okay, I'll give a suggestion. Let's move it back to the Saturday before Thanksgiving, and let's make it a conference game. So it's
Saturday before Thanksgiving.
Yes.
That's the week before rivalry week, and it's a full slate of college football games that day.
Well, you know what? It used to be on rivalry Saturday, so why not keep it on rivalry Saturday? It wasn't until maybe about 20 years ago that they jumped Army Navy into its own spot. Actually, it wasn't even then. It was when they started doing the conference championship games. The conference championship games were the same Saturday as the Army-Navy game. So they bumped the Army-Navy game to the second Saturday of December. But before they had the conference championship games, Army Navy normally was just played on rivalry Saturday after Thanksgiving. It was when I was a cadet.
Yeah.
So, why not just move it back? It's another rivalry game, and make it a conference game. Why does it doesn't even have to be neutral anymore. That way it actually matters when the two teams play, so that they're playing. If they're both in the running for the AAC championship game, it not only means it's a star game, it also means it matters for the AAC standings. And that actually ups the ante of the competition a little bit. But the stipulation is this: the Saturday before the Army Navy game is an off week, an idle week for both teams. So, there's always an equal footing, and you can never walk away from the Army Navy game again saying that, well, they got a bye week and we didn't, and that made the difference. So, but there's a lot of hoops that would have to be jumped through in order to make that happen. For one, there was the big contract that was just signed with CBS to host the game. Then there's all these venues that have already been signed and have contracts with to hold the Army Navy game, and the dates are already set on that. So we're talking about a change to the Army Navy game that, if it came into fruition, if it actually happened, it would be what, 5-10 years from now before it ever even happened. And who knows whether or not Army Navy will still be in the AAC then. We don't even know.
Yeah, I think it's hard to project what college football is going to look like more than about 2 years out. Except that the big teams are going to continue to be the big teams and are going to continue to dominate really television and the revenue for college sports. But I'm pretty confident the service academies are going to maintain themselves as factors in college football, and maybe part of the adults in the room about reminding people that college is about education and preparing young Americans for the next 40 years of their lives.
Where are you coming with these outdated concepts, Ken?
Well, I know I'm outdated. I'm over the hill, but that's what somebody's got to say that, because I mean it's you're all you hear from some of the players, some of the basketball players we know who played and had long careers in mostly in Europe or Asia, and they all say by age 30 their elbows and knees are starting to really hurt.
Yeah. Well, Forrest Gump said, after 4 years of playing college football, I graduated from University of Alabama.
Yeah.
If Forrest Gump played today in the era of the transfer portal and NIL, that line would have to be changed. Instead, it would be after 7 years of playing college football, I graduated from the 4th university I ended up at.
Well, the problem, is whether that last university that you go to will accept all your credits. Because there was a basketball player we knew, very good guy, went from Iona, went to St. John's, and there was a real question about whether St. John's would accept like 75 credits that he had accumulated in 2 different colleges. And that gets to be an issue and at basketball, we see quite often players are in 4 different schools now, especially the graduate year.
Yeah.
Football, it's a little less because it's harder to weave yourself into a football program. And but all the different issues. But I believe it's always, at the end of the day, got to be about education and valuing the scholarship at prestigious universities.
And unfortunately, what is happening right now is that college football, as a microcosm of NCAA athletics at the FBS level, is turning more into a opportunity to chase money. And if you're riding the pine, look for another school where you think you can start. and it ruins the cohesion of teamwork, and it is a unbelievably difficult situation for college football coaches who are trying to build culture in their locker room and to start building and develop players within their own pipeline of talent. They can't do it.
Okay.
They keep losing talent. And then they have to figure out how to allocate this money. And you're never going to make everybody happy.
Not to mention that a lot of the mid majors are going to start losing even more money than they are today, because stadium attendance is going to go down, and their television revenue is a fraction of what the Power Four schools get. And you can see some of the mid majors are going to drop out of Division One. But one thing I'm hoping is they'll get rid of the words FBS. You know, that's now outdated. I've never been comfortable with that term, football bowl subdivision, and then
Um,
the other group being the football championship subdivision. And hopefully they get rid of that. I mean, that would be at least one positive.
I don't know. I guess they could start calling it the semi-pro um, subdivision of NFL. I don't know because
Well, something. At least they'll probably go to the football playoff division. Both have
yeah.
playoffs. So
One thing I do want to say, because it's a related topic, just a lot of people have been very critical of Kanye Udo for jumping into the transfer portal. I just want to say this, you know, it's his right. He is a yearling. Any yearling or sophomore at any of the service academies, regardless of whether they play athletics or not, may leave at any time. Their decision. They are not obligated to any service obligation until the first class of their cow or junior year. When they go to their very first class of the first semester of their junior year is when they incur their service obligation. Prior to that, they can leave anytime they want. It's fully within Kanye Udo's right to seek greener pastures through the transfer portal. He gave a very eloquent statement to the Brotherhood and to his fans, and I, for one, appreciate his sincerity. And I honestly, Kanye, you're probably not even watching this, but I just want to thank you for what you did contribute to the Brotherhood and to Army football. You're an amazing talent, and I think that you will land on your feet at a very nice school. And I hope that you are able to cash in on some NIL money while we're talking about this. But I did see one school on the latest post that you made that apparently has been in contact with you that I would say, please don't go there. And that's Tulane, because guess what? Army plays Tulane every year. So we don't want to be seeing you on the other side of the ball wearing another
yeah,
uniform.
I'm
Right?
kind
Look
of
somewhere
curious
else.
how much NIL money Tulane is paying, but they're a well capitalized school, and they have resources. Okay, well, we're way over time tonight. Let's thank everybody. Chuck Donegan, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
Long Island, and Jack McGurk from Pelham. And
Happy to be here.
again, happy birthday. And Richard
Thank
Miller
you.
from Florida. Sam
Thank
Houston
you.
from the Beat Navy studio in Huntsville, Alabama.
Yep.
Um, and I'm in White Plains, New York. And one thing I talked to Coach Monk, and you can see the interview on my Twitter account, KG Kreitzer Media. He wished Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to all of the soldiers serving around the world. You know, from Korea, Japan, to places around the country where they may not be able to get home, to places in Europe and Africa. And Coach Maida, as he always does, is very eloquent and genuine in his Christmas holiday greeting to the soldiers around the world. So we will get back together next week probably before Christmas, and we'll discuss in more detail the Independence Bowl and the college football playoff first round. Should be interesting to see what's happening. So thanks again, everybody, and again, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and we'll see you again next week.